Chapter 1. And as usual, I'll be the hero, Germany sighed. And how exactly does this relate to the economy again? Really? Meeting on serious financial issues, and you make it a speech on fast food? England snorted. I don't know why we would even bother to allow you to speak. Because my ideas always work. What about the time? I said always. Not taking any more objections, America turned back to his visual aid, a map of his 50 states that had nothing whatsoever to do with his presentation, and continued. It was just another ridiculous world meeting. While most of the nations were supposed to attend, very few didn't feel the need to call in sick or make other excuses involving puffins, K-dramas, or back pain. Only the 20 slated to speak, as shown on Germany's carefully typed and distributed agenda, ended up coming at all. Only one of those 20 had gotten to present so far, despite the meeting being an hour in. Of course, these things never started on time. After a bit more bickering on America and England's part, instigated by the former, who decided eating hamburgers in the middle of his speech somehow helped drive his point home, America finally brought his presentation to a close. No one had questions, as they were all, apart from Italy, who decided it was time for a mid-morning siesta, quite sure nothing could possibly make his plan work. Next on the agenda was France. By the time he finished his demonstration how bringing sexy back could save the world, most of the nations had decided this meeting was an utter joke and stopped paying attention. Next up was England, then Russia, who did, in fact, manage to recapture the attention of the other nations with a well-placed call. Switzerland and Liechtenstein, Japan, China, someone no one quite recognized, Germany, Poland, Spain, Italy, who had woken up by then mumbling about needing to eat some pasta, Romano, Austria, Belarus, whose speech soon descended into thinly veiled hitting on her brother, Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, and finally Hungary. Of course, by then most everyone else had fallen asleep, except Germany, who had just about given up on this and all future meetings altogether. After discerning no questions were just dying to be asked, Germany officially adjourned the meeting. A few pseudo-sleepers popped up and ready to go, while the few awake had to roost the others. By the time everyone was awake, but Japan, who started apologizing instantly once he realized he had dozed off, the first few had gone out the hallway out to the front door, hoping to get out before Russia could awaken and catch up. Latvia was the first to the door. He cast a quick glance over his shoulder, just in case, and then finally swung the oak panel open. Quoi? Latvia stared at the outside world before jumping and shutting the door back closed so no one could think it was his fault. Latvia? Hungary started, walking up behind him. He squeaked and put his back against the door. Yes? Was there something wrong with the door? She asked. No. Then why did you slam it shut? She tried to sneak over to the other handle, but Latvia blocked her path. I never opened it, he responded, hysterically, as other nations began gathering in the lobby. Oh no, what's wrong, Latvia? Piped Russia, stepping towards the door. Nothing, absolutely nothing. Forget this, Switzerland said, pushing his way out of the crowd and succeeding in shoving Latvia aside. I'm going home. He gripped the handle and swung the door open. He then proceeded to stare at the view. What's going on? Germany said, unable to see out the door because of the crowd. All right, what trick did you pull? America finally shouted, pointing accusatorily at Russia, as it was in his borders the meeting was held. I didn't do anything, I think, Russia replied, blinking at the outside. Nations had come in that morning from the streets of a bustling city. Now, the image that greeted them was that of a forest. Oh, quit blithering, England said, opening the other door so he wouldn't have to squeeze past any of the others. He took a step out and peered along the side of the building. Walking a bit further, he thumped one of the trees. Well, it doesn't show any signs of an illusion. He crossed his arms, pondering. Why are you acting like this is completely normal, Laru? Interjected China, who was to some extent hiding from the mysterious trees, hiding behind Russia. So it's like an actual forest? Poland said, taking a step out but keeping one foot in. Like, cool. Cool? Echoed France. This isn't cool, this is weird. He stared out into the trees. What are we? It certainly doesn't seem very Russia-like, commented Estonia. Hadn't stepped outside, but could still feel the heat. Russia agreed, much to the relief of his underling. I would be able to tell if you were in my country. He glanced over his shoulder at the glob of nations in the foyer. Does anyone else know where we might be? None of the other nations seemed to feel in the presence of his or her country. This is crazy, Lithuania said to himself. There's no way that the whole building could just teleport. He looked at the trees. Sure, they could have been an illusion, They were too afraid to go towards them, in case they weren't. "Maybe we've been abducted by aliens!" America blurted out. This caused several of his enemies to tell him how idiotic that idea was, as soon as the whole foyer was full of nations mumbling amongst themselves. Meanwhile, England had circled around the building, finding they were truly surrounded by forest. Coming back to the front door, he almost ran into Germany, who was making sure this was real. Germany walked back into the foyer. The nations were still moaning or blaming each other for this. "Everyone quiet!" he finally barked. The voice faded to murmurs as the others turned towards him. "Whatever's going on, this isn't the only way to figure it out. We'll take turns elaborating on our ideas of how to attack the situation." "Create another meeting," Romano grumbled. "Of course the potato freak wants to make us to go through this sort of thing again." Tactfully ignoring this comment, Germany called on the only person who was waving his hand in the air to speak. "I seriously think we've been abducted by aliens." Germany closed his eyes and exhaled, narrowly keeping himself from face-palming. "And how do you suggest we solve the situation?" We find the aliens, and I'll beat them up until they decide to take us back." "Next idea, please," Germany called. Japan's hand was raised just barely above his head. "Yes, Japan?" "I can't say what has happened. It's hard the Aruka was doing. But whatever the case, I think it would be a good idea to explore the area, so at least know what we are dealing with, and perhaps where exactly we are." He bowed his head, a bit to indicate he was done. "Alright, next. Let's just go ahead and move out of here," Bain said, apparently unaware someone else was still talking. "I think Japan's idea sounds good enough. We should probably get going before it's dark. Romana agrees with me, don't you?" he sang, throwing an arm over Romana's shoulder. "Get off of me, you stinking tomato bastard." "Alright," Germany interrupted impatiently. "Let's head out." Most of the nations had finally found their way outside of the building. After Belarus had Russia's indirect request, coerced Latvia into leaving the room, and Hungary dragged Austria out, everyone congregated in a clump just outside the doors. "Oi," came a call a few meters away. "I think you'll want to check this out." Following the sound of England's voice, the crowd gradually drifted to the scene in question. It was just another stretch of forest, but on one tree, tacked a sheet of paper. It was a plain rectangle of white with words written in black. The rules. 1. For each of you, there's a certain nation on this island you must kill. 2. If you kill your nation, you will go home. 3. If you do not kill your nation, you will not go home. Enjoy your immortality while it lasts. The nation stood in silence as I read and analyzed the words. "This sounds fun!" Russia finally exclaimed, breaking the silence. Latvia immediately hid behind Estonia, who jerked at this and hid behind Belarus. "Hang on!" China started, backing up as Russia withdrew a length of pipe from his coat. "It's just a piece of paper, Aru. There's no reason to do anything drastic." "But it explains everything, though," Russia responded, smiling as he twirled the pipe in his hands. "And I could use a little fun after that long meeting." "Yeah, bring it," America responded, and taking an exaggerated fisticuffs pose. What about the immortality part?" Liechtenstein said quietly. "Don't worry about it," Switzerland replied, making sure he was ready to fire the gun slung over his shoulder. "It's all garbage. This island," Germany read out loud. "That gives us some hints as to where we are." He peered across the trees, musing over the first point and doing his best to ignore the fourth. "Is it just me?" Austria started slowly. "Or has the building?" Some of the others turned towards where they had just left. There was absolutely nothing but more trees. No building in sight. "Whoa, hang on," Poland said, running over to where the doors had just been, and wandering around. Nothing strange, just trees. "How does the whole building disappear like that?" Canada whispered. "We're stuck," finally concluded France. "We don't know that for sure," Germany responded, some of his composure starting to slip. "First, we should at least make sure it actually is an island." "Well, what does it matter?" Russia responded. "The paper already said it was an island, and I'd hate to put off any of this fun." "We're exploring," Germany said firmly, marching off. Italy and Japan immediately started to follow him, while others joined the assembly a few moments later. The Baltic states hesitated, having no idea whether it was safe to stay with Russia or to run off and risk making him mad. But once Poland came and dragged Lithuania after the others, the three went ahead with everyone. The forest passed by them in an eerie silence. It all seemed about the same. medium-height deciduous trees, an occasional bush, a few creeping vines. But as soon as the trees began to thin out, and sure enough, a stretch of light blue water came out to meet him. No other land masses were in sight. "I don't like this," Latvija mumbled, looking down the shore, which swept on in the jagged dark. America whooped, stripping off his jacket. "Now we know we can swim to safety!" "We didn't know of any another landmass, at least not on this side," responded Switzerland. "And besides," England added, crossing his arms, "you're a horrible swimmer. If anyone could make it a long distance, it would be me, not you. Although, in your case, you at least have more than enough fat to float easily." "Oh, bring it on!" America roared, kicking off his shoes. "You two aren't serious, are you?" France reprimanded. "We're not close enough to swim anywhere, and besides," he looked sideways uncomfortably, "if we can't even go back to the meeting building, do you really think we could escape that easily?" "Of course we don't," England sighed, leaning against one of the trees and staring out at the darkening waters. "We didn't come here through physical means, so it wouldn't make sense for us to leave like that." "Germany!" Italy suddenly wailed. "I left all my pasta in the building!" "Yeah, what are we going to eat?" America asked no one in particular. "We can eat all we want once we kill each other and go home, da." The Baltics inched a little further away from the one already brandishing his faucet pipe. "We can't, no, that's not a trick," Germany responded. "We'll just stick together, find some food, and just stand around and think it will suddenly appear at home, Maru?" interrupted China, gripping the wok he had brought to serve food most of the others had ignored. "We don't really have any other real ideas," Germany countered. "But if we all just keep our heads—" "Forget you!" hollered Romano. "I bet you're just trying to keep us from getting back, you sorry potato-loving son of a— We're really not going to kill each other, are we?" Estonia put out there shakingly. "It seems to be the only option," Russia sang. "This is crazy," Switzerland yelled, pushing his sister towards the edge of the crowd so he could stand between her and everyone else. "Has everyone lost their minds?" "Yeah, like, there has to be some other way out," interjected Poland. "I agree," Germany responded. "We should at least explore the rest of the shore." "What? Germany?" Russia interrupted. "You don't want to follow the rules this time?" "Just because a stupid piece of paper." "Most rules to follow are on a piece of paper," Russia countered. "And I, for one, believe," he started to raise his pipe over his head, "we should follow them." The nearest nation went down with a clang. "He's lost it!" France yelled, pushing to the edge of the crowd, away from Russia. "We're getting out of here," Switzerland told his sister shortly before grabbing her and running off. Italy had already sped a good few meters away, but was waiting for Germany and Japan. Germany, distressed and having lost all control of the crowd, gritted his teeth and took off after him. The nations continued to split off into groups, running madly away from Russia, who had just about finished pounding Hungary's head in. And so the game began. Chapter 2. Germany. We were a good 50 meters back into the forest by the time Italy finally started to calm down. After almost running straight into a tree, he spins around and plops onto the ground. I slow myself down, overshooting him a bit before I'm able to come to a stop. Japan, who started off last and never quite caught up, jogs the rest of the way towards us and sits down himself. "Are we done running?" I shot through my light panning. Italy crossed his legs and looked up at me, blinking some of the frightened tears from his eyes before nodding. "I'm too old to be running around like this," Japan gasps, finally able to take off his suit jacket. "It's just great to be thrust into this situation in business clothes, no less." I've already taken off my tie and unbuttoned some of my undershirt. Japan seems to have shed his briefcase as well. Italy, of course, wasn't in anything out of the ordinary to begin with, but he's taking off his jacket too. Of course, our outfits are hardly the worst of our problems right now. It's getting dark, so we won't be able to explore any more today. I begin, starting to pace. We should at least find some food and a source of fresh water. While I wasn't able to keep an eye out during our run, I did catch a few animal tracks near the building. So both food and water must be here. We'll catch our breath, and then we'll be off. Italy contemplates this, clacking his shoes together. "Do you think there's any pasta here?" "There won't be any pasta here," I sigh. "Just game, maybe some fruits or nuts." Italy whimpers, looking down sadly. I sigh. "Don't worry, we'll be out of here before you know it. I think, obviously, something's going on. We're probably trapped. Russia at least is going to be trying to kill us. And that paper, it's the only thing that even gives a hint as to why we're here. But it can't be right. Enjoy your immortality while it lasts. We're nations. We're not going to lose our immortality without some war or revolution. And in a group of 20 of us, major nations too. It's ridiculous. Of course, it's ridiculous to show up on this island in the first place. Let's not worry about this right now. There are more pressing issues at the moment. Keep an eye out for any signs of game or any edible plants. I take a step forward as others get back to their feet. And keep an eye out for Russia too. I reach into an inner coat pocket to make sure my one-shot handgun is still here, is still there. Even if it takes more than just muscle, we'll be able to defend ourselves from Russia or anyone else. I won't be able to use this on any game, unfortunately. We'll make do. We won't have a choice. We get to walking as the light continues to dim. My wristwatch says 4. I may need to adjust it. If time has somehow changed along with place, is time possible? Well, it is, but so is most of what's going on right now. I don't know how this leap of sorts could even happen, let alone how it works. But all I need to know is how to get us out of here. I suppose I know exactly how, if that paper is true, but I refuse to believe it could be. There has to be a better way out. Maybe there's a nearby landmass, or maybe a plane could catch sight of us. There won't be anyone I could call. My phone has no reception. I have a feeling the others don't either. Japan. You don't have reception on your cell phone, do you? I start anyway. Japan checks his pockets, but realizes he must have left the gadget in his briefcase. We can go back and look for it. Before turning around, I glance at Italy. You don't have your phone, do you? No, I left pretty much everything in the building. He beams. Alright, I sigh, stopping. Let's go back the other way and find Japan's briefcase. I start walking, even though I still feel like his phone isn't going to be any better off than mine. We can find tracks and things in that direction as much as we can this way. I keep a more careful eye out as we progress back to where our run started. I doubt Russia's still hanging around here, but who knows what he's doing, or most of the others. For that matter, they're all crazy, so I wouldn't be surprised if some of them have decided to go on a killing spree. Whether that paper's the truth or not, this place is much more dangerous because of it. We've carefully retracted up about half of our heavily intended running footprints when Italy whimpered that he's thirsty. It's actually surprising how long he's held out. He's only mentioned pasta twice, too. He must be too exhausted to keep talking. I don't blame him this time. We're only walking now, but it definitely hasn't gotten any cooler. I'm just glad he hasn't decided to suddenly stop and take a nap. This is actually quite an achievement for him. Are we anywhere near water? He mumbles, looking up at me hopefully. It doesn't look like it, I reply, squinting at the ground that just keeps getting darker. But I hesitate a second before putting a hand in lower inner coat pocket. If you really need something. I wait a second longer before finally making myself pull out a bottle of beer. It takes me another few moments before I'm able to sort of hold it out in an offering position. If you really needs it. Italy smiles, relieved. Grazie, Germany. He tries to pluck it from me, but I realize I'm gripping it too hard for him to take it. I force myself to let go, and Italy starts grabbing at the lid. Just don't drink all of it, okay? I push a few branches aside to check for Japan's briefcase before moving on. One of the branches flies back and it hits my coat. There's a clink. Ooh, so you have more than one? Italy asks, pausing from his attempt to open the bottle with his teeth. No, it's just a handgun I keep onto me. But didn't it click against something else? Japan brings up, more thoughtful than accusatory. Before I can stop him, Italy flips up the side of my coat. The 2 remaining bottles in their specially made pockets are exposed. That armor! He announces. Germany, I know you prefer to drink your beer yourself, but in this situation you should let us know of anything that could help our survival. Yes. I bow my head a bit with a sigh. I apologize, and in that case, I hesitate but eventually flip out the other side of my coat, showing the other 3 bottles. I also have these. Italy, who has almost managed to get the cap off himself, looks for a second before having a rare moment of insight. So why did you bring 6 bottles of beer to the meeting? It wasn't for the meeting, I just, keep some on my person at all times in case of situations like these. I nod powerfully. Truthfully, just about all of these were for the meeting, but it was one of those times where one other person was always looking. Ooh, I get it! Italy responds cheerfully, finally getting the cap off. He tosses a bit of metal behind him, and I can only watch helplessly as he takes a swig. He then spits it right back into the bottle. Yeah, it's warm! I immediately grab his collar and jerk him back and forth by it. Of course it's warm! It's been in my coat in the seat! At this point, he's begun to wail for mercy. You just ruined an Hetalia bottle. I'll find him and lock her, you little Germany. Japan pulls us apart with some struggle. Please refrain from hurting Italy like that. It is inappropriate for the current situation. Right. I clear my throat and look back at Italy. He's wailing and clutching the bottle like a child's safety blanket. I'm sorry, Germany, he cries. Please don't hate me. He sniffles loudly, keeping his tearful puppy dog eyes on me. I heave a sigh, cradling my forehead in my hand. I don't hate you, Italy. He calms down a little bit. We're still friends, right? Ah, we're still friends. Okay. He sniffs again. Just please never do that again. I exhale. Ever. We walk in silence for a second, during which I take off my coat. Since my secret's out, there's not much of a reason to keep the thing on. Speaking of things necessary for our survival, I start. I don't believe you've mentioned that sword at your waist. Japan pauses, laying a hand on the hilt. Oh, well, I'm not a backwards nation anymore. I wouldn't carry around an actual sword. This is, purely aesthetic. He slides the handle out a bit to show the gleaming metal. If it's aesthetic, I don't want to know how sharp the functional version is. Checking a bush for the briefcase, Japan puts the katana back, looking to the ground in embarrassment. We go through a few more trees in our path before we're suddenly back at the shore. I immediately check the area for other nations, but it seems pretty empty. I did not see any sign of my briefcase, Japan says, frowning. Of course, my eyesight isn't what it once was, but I didn't see it either. I reply, crossing my arms and looking out at the waves reflecting in the sunset. Things simply seem to disappear in this place. Japan comments quietly. Italy quivers. We're not going to disappear, are we? Not if we escape, Japan replies, dropping his fingers on his sword hilt. What do you mean, if? I respond, turning towards him. We are going to get off the island. Japan just meets my gaze silently, before looking out at the water. Without facing us, he slowly draws out his katana. I check the trees in case he heard someone coming, but we're alone. Japan? Italy starts. What are you doing? Japan just looks at the half-sun's red reflection on the metal. He finally starts, eyes flitting up to look at us. I'm going to kill both of you now. Italy immediately squeaks and hides behind me while I take a step back. Hey Japan, calm down. I don't know what's going through your head right now, but... He takes a step towards us, holding his sword ready to strike. If one of you is the one I must kill to leave, I should kill you as soon as possible. Hang on, there's no reason to. Do you doubt you'll come back? He asks. I find myself taking another step back and starting to wish I hadn't set my coat and gun down just out of reach. No, but you can't fall for that piece of paper. Believe me, you can find another way out. But what if the paper is true? Faces us unwaringly. If you really do begin to lose our immortality, I want to make sure I kill you, but I know you're going to come back. He takes a step forward for momentum, bringing his sword around and hacking into my jugular. I hold on to consciousness just long enough to see Italy go down too. I open my eyes to darkness. Am I dead? No, I don't think so. A throbbing starts up in the side of my neck, and I vaguely start to remember what happened before I blacked out. Japan. Did he escape after all? No, of course he didn't. That would mean the rules were true. They probably are our best shot at getting out of here, but there just has to be some other way that doesn't involve all of us having to kill each other. I shift, propping myself up on my elbow as my eyes start to adjust to the faint moonlight. Japan is seated Caesar style, facing the trees and scanning for enemies. Italy's lying on his side, but I can't tell whether he's started to breathe again or not. Germany! Seeing me alive, Japan hurries over and helps pull me to a seated position. How's Italy? I start, my voice still recuperating some. He hasn't come back just yet. He looks over his shoulder at the pale nation, follow his gaze for a minute before turning back to face him. So, I guess neither of us is the one you're supposed to kill then. He gets a start and looks down at his hands. No, you're not. He glances back at Italy before continuing. I'm very sorry for what I did to you both. He bows deeply, bangs brushing the ground before he comes back up. I wanted to make sure, but it was inexcusable for me to do such a thing, especially without your permission. It's alright. I cross my legs, putting a hand over my neck where a thin cut is still healing. I know where you were coming from, and it looks like we're going to be okay. I look back over at Italy. I think he may have started breathing again. Japan shakes his head. It still wasn't right. I'm sorry. He nods at my dress shirt, which is now pretty well bloodstained. I shouldn't have ruined your clothing either. He looks over at 2 patches of red sand, and I realize he must have moved us away from where he killed us. I at least washed the blood off your neck and face, but... He trails off, still unable to look me in the eye. I only wanted to make sure, but I just shouldn't have. He faces me, his eyes shining. I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking straight, and I'm scared. He turns away from me. I try to think of what I could say to him. Before I can come up with anything, he's withdrawing his sword again. Japan? He looks over the blade, which has since been washed, returning just enough to offer the handle to me. It's your turn, he says. I look at the blade silently. We should make sure none of us have to kill each other as soon as possible, don't you think? I suppose. Continues to hold it out towards me, and I go ahead and take it. Without blinking, he turns to expose the side of his neck. Go ahead. I hesitate, weighing the weapon in my hands. You can at least take... No, that's hardly fair. He clasps his hands together. I ruined yours and Italy, so it only seems fair to kill me as is. No, I'm not going to punish you for being afraid, and it's ridiculous to ruin any more of our possessions. So go ahead. I watch him until he finally gives in and takes his shirt off. Alright. I hesitate, rubbing the handle with my thumb. I look back over at Italy, who's starting to stir. Italy's waking up. Maybe we should wait. Germany. Japan shifts to look back at me for a second. Rule number 4. Enjoy your immortality while it lasts. We don't have time to spare. I exhale, knowing he's right, as he turns back. It wouldn't hurt that much, and I'm sure he'll come back just as quickly as I did. It takes me a few more moments of hesitation, but I finally tell him the strike is coming. Ready the sword and plunge it into his neck. He scoots away from me a bit to keep some of the blood from hitting me before he falls to his side, twitching and bleeding out. I set the katana down shakily as the blood flow gradually slows to a trickle. Germany? I jump to see Italy wobbly, sitting up staring at me wide-eyed. He told me to. I start to quickly take a step back from the scene of the crime. I can't explain it all at once, but... I trail off, squinting. Why is everything getting blurry? My eyesight has already recovered from dying. It starts to get brighter, much faster than daybreak could manage. The image of Japan, Italy, and the shore continues to blur out before my vision finally starts to sharpen again. But the 2 before me don't become any clearer. I rub at my eyes, looking around again before I start to realize what has happened. The image before me is now my own room, the bedside lamp shining, the bedsheets impeccably straight on the mattress. Bewildered, I stagger to my feet and take a few steps back. The carpet's spongy under my feet. I reach out and put a hand on the table. It's solid, as wooden as I left it. It takes a second for it to finally start to sink in. I'm back home. Japan was the one I had to kill. The rules are real.